The late autumn wind, sharp and unforgiving, carried the fine, powdery scent of alkali dust and dying prairie sage across the vast, indifferent expanse of the Wyoming frontier. It worried the loose chinking between the logs of Elara Vance's cabin, making the structure sound less like a home and more like a restless, brittle cage. Elara stood motionless at the single glass window, her silhouette slender against the failing light, watching the brutal spectacle of the sun bleeding out over the horizon. The grassland, usually a defiant, endless green, was now painted in the faded hues of copper, rust, and ash. It had been 4 relentless moons since they'd lowered Silas into the hard, unyielding ground behind the modest wooden cross of the Oakhaven mission. 4 months since Elara, at 23, became just another redundant, forgotten widow in a territory that consumed hopeful women with casual cruelty. The women of Oakhaven, a collection of weary settlers 5 miles east, whispered of her youth, her too bright, almost defiant hair, and the pity of her choosing to waste away in this solitary homestead. They saw a prison. Elara saw the last, frayed thread connecting her to Silas, to the fever-bright dreams they had brought west in their creaking wagon, to the life they had sworn to carve out of this empty world with their own hands. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, the sudden mist of her breath blossoming and dissolving. The prairie stretched away from the window, boundless and terrifying, broken only by the dark, skeletal line of cottonwoods along the winding path of Willow Creek. There were moments, especially when the coyotes began their eerie evening chorus and the shadows stretched long and became alien shapes, that she felt utterly abandoned, the last soul alive in the world. The coffee, brewed strong and scalding hours ago, had cooled to a bitter, thick sludge, but she lifted the mug and sipped it anyway, seeking only the familiar burn, not sustenance. She had stopped cooking proper meals weeks ago. The effort was meaningless, the silence at the table a heavy, suffocating cloth pressed against her ears until she was sure she would crack. A sudden, sharp movement in the high grass caught her eye. Elara leaned closer, squinting into the failing light, her nerves already stretched thin. Nothing. Only the wind creating shimmering waves like an ocean of faded gold. But the feeling had grown undeniable lately. The sense of being watched. It was not a foolish fancy born of solitude. It was a cold, constant awareness, a prickling on her nape that made her spin around when collecting water or scattering feed for the chickens, only to find the empty land staring back with its vast, featureless gaze. Silas had chosen this isolated spot deliberately. "We'll build our own paradise, Elara, away from the endless, stupid judgment of town life." His paradise had turned out to be a fatal fever. Elara moved away from the window, lighting the oil lamp and driving the shadows back into the corners of the single, small cabin. It was sturdy, at least. Silas had insisted on good timber, a solid stone hearth, and a real glass window that had cost them dearly. The bed stood against the far wall, still made for 2, though only one side bore the indentations of sleep. Above the door, his hunting rifle hung on its hooks, loaded and ready, just as he had taught her. She often considered moving into Oakhaven, taking a small room, maybe finding work at the general store, but a stubborn, desperate pride held her here. Leaving would be the final, official admission that Silas was utterly gone, that the dream was dead too. The fire needed tending. She knelt before the hearth, adding a thick piece of cedar to the dying embers. Her supply of seasoned wood was getting dangerously low, another chore she now bore alone, her hands growing raw and capable in ways her sheltered mother in the East would have mourned. As she prodded the fire back to life, she heard it, a sound that did not belong to the natural rhythms of the prairie night, not the high, distant yip of a coyote, nor the familiar, dry rustle of the wind. This was deliberate, measured, heavy footsteps. Her heart, a sudden frantic bird, battered against her ribs. She snatched the rifle down, her arms steadying through sheer terror, checking the mechanism, cocking the hammer. The footsteps began to circle the cabin, slow and purposeful, too heavy for any common beast, too confident for a mere vagrant. Elara pressed her back against the wall next to the window, the rifle raised, trying to peer out without offering a target. Darkness and wind were all she could see, but the steps continued, and now she could hear breathing, deep, steady inhalation and exhalation that suggested a massive, far larger than human chest. The wooden boards of the small porch let out a long, heavy groan under an enormous weight. "Who's there?" Alara called, amazed her voice came out as a sharp, steady command. "I am armed, and I will shoot. Leave my property now." The footsteps stopped. The silence that fell was more paralyzing than the sound. Alara's mind became a frantic ticking clock. 10 heartbeats, 20, 30. Just as she began to believe the solitude had finally birthed a terrifying illusion, a shadow passed the window. It was massive, impossibly tall, a silhouette that blotted out the scattering of stars, broader than any man she had ever encountered. It was gone in an instant, simply dissolving back into the endless prairie darkness as if it had never been solid. Alara stayed pinned to the wall until her legs cramped and her arms ached from the weight of the rifle. Only when the first pale promise of dawn began to creep across the cabin floor did she finally lower the weapon and sink onto a chair by the cold hearth. In Oakhaven, later that week, the story took shape. Whispered conversations stopped cold when she entered the general store. Dad. Women exchanged nervous, knowing glances at the well. They spoke of Kalen, a Shoshone giant, a warrior rumored to stand 7 feet tall, who moved with the stealth of a shadow, despite his colossal size. Some insisted he was a Tsawai, a ghost haunting the borderlands between the white settlements and the tribal territories. Others claimed he was real as rain, a solitary warrior looking for something or someone. "He's been spotted near the homesteads," Mrs. Hemlock murmured to her sister, not knowing Alara could hear. "Looking for trouble, or worse." Alara gathered her supplies, ignoring the feigned sympathy. Let them call her a hysterical widow. She knew what she had seen. That night, she moved Silas's old armchair to face the door, the rifle across her lap, fighting off the desperate pull of sleep. Kalen did not return, but his presence was a tangible weight in the air, watching, waiting. The long, lonely nights had taken a profound and terrifying new shape. She was still alone, yes, but she was no longer unobserved. You, the reader, have watched Alara's fear turn to vigilance. Now, as the observation continues, what one action should Alara take immediately to shift the balance of power, even slightly? Should she barricade the door or leave a message for her watcher? The coffee went cold in her mug again. The fire burned low. Somewhere out there in the immense darkness, she knew the giant walked his path, drawn to her small cabin by forces neither of them yet understood. A dangerous thought began to take root in her terror. This constant watch was better than the suffocating weight of being forgotten, of disappearing into the prairie like she'd never existed at all. The storm hit without mercy in mid-November, rolling across the land like an ancient physical wrath. Alara had seen bad weather, but this was different. The wind didn't just howl, it screamed, slamming into the solid timber walls with enough force to make the structure groan like a tortured beast. She'd secured the shutters, but the storm raged harder. Lightning split the sky in jagged, blinding white tears, illuminating the landscape in terrifying flashes. In those brief moments, the familiar grassland became something alien, a writhing, chaotic sea of shadow and motion. Alara huddled near the fireplace, desperately feeding the flames to keep the cold at bay. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in an hour. Sleet and freezing rain hammered the roof like concentrated gunfire. She pulled Silas's old coat tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the faint, fading scent of tobacco and hard work that still clung to the wool. Thunder cracked directly overhead, the concussion shaking dust from the rafters. She had just risen to check the door bar when lightning blazed again, and in that instant of white fire, she saw him. He stood perhaps 30 feet from her window, utterly motionless despite the gale that bent the grass. Flat around him, Kalen. Even through the rain-streaked iced glass, even in that split second of illumination, his size defied all common sense. He towered above the storm, rain streaming down a face carved from dark, impassive stone. Alara's scream died in her throat as darkness reclaimed the world. She pressed herself against the cold glass, waiting for the next flash, her breath fogging the pain. When it came, the space where he stood was empty. Only the thrashing grass remained, but she knew he was there. She could feel him with a raw animal awareness, a primitive sense that made every hair on her body stand on end. Another lightning strike, closer. The thunder followed instantly, shaking the entire cabin, and there, movement by the well, a shadow too large, too solid to be windborne. He was circling the cabin, she realized, not seeking shelter, but checking her defenses, or perhaps simply continuing his relentless watch. Ilara grabbed the rifle. What good would a handful of soft lead bullets do against a force that stood untouched in a storm that was bending trees double? Then, the wind died, not gradually, but all at once, as if an invisible, immense door had been slammed shut. The silence that followed was more unnerving than the storm's howling. Only the soft fall of rain remained, pattering against the roof like nervous fingers. And then, the knock. 3 measured, distinct raps on her door, loud enough to echo through the sudden stillness of the cabin. Ilara's knees nearly buckled. In all his weeks of watching, he had never approached the door, never made his presence so deliberately, so formally known. She stood frozen, the rifle clutched to her chest. The knocks came again, patient, unhurried, as if he knew she had no other choice. "What do you want?" The words were a choked whisper. She cleared her throat, trying again. "I said, what do you want of me?" No answer. Only the soft patter of the rain and her own ragged, terrified breathing. Ilara crept to the door, pressing her ear against the rough oak. Nothing. But she could feel him, massive, waiting just inches away, on the other side of the wood. The presence was overwhelming, like standing at the base of a high cliff. Lightning flashed one last time, and she glimpsed a shadow through the tiny gap beneath the door. Immense bare feet, planted firm on the porch boards. He wasn't even seeking shelter. "Please," she said, hating the smallness of her own voice. "Just go away." A sound came then, deep as distant thunder, brief as a single breath. Not quite a laugh, but a resonance of amusement or recognition. Then those massive feet turned and moved away, each heavy step making the porch boards cry out in protest. Ilara stayed against the door, hyperventilating, until she was certain he was gone. Only then did she dare peek through the window. The storm was already moving east, muttering its final threats. Stars began to emerge through the fractured clouds. That's when she saw what he had left. On her porch, placed precisely where she could not possibly miss it, sat a bundle wrapped tightly in an oilcloth. Ilara stared at it for a long, agonizing moment, then grabbed the fireplace poker and used the tip to drag the bundle inside, slamming the door shut and dropping the heavy bar. Inside the waterproof wrapping lay a generous portion of fresh venison, cleaned and expertly cut, enough meat to last her 2 weeks if she was careful. Beneath it, wrapped separately, were herbs she did not recognize, dried leaves and roots that smelled of ozone, damp earth, and pine. Ilara sank into Silas's chair, staring at the offering. The meat was butchered with precision, the work of a highly skilled hand. This was not the work of some savage, as the town had claimed. This act of protection and provision changes the dynamic entirely. What is Kalen's motivation? Is it a crude claim of ownership, or something deeper? She stored the meat in her cold cellar, hanging it properly. The herbs she left on the table, mysterious and somehow patient. That night, sleep was fitful, broken by dreams of silent giants and storms. The next morning, she ventured out, rifle in hand. The chicken coop had held, though the birds were nervous. That's when she found the footprints. Pressed deep into the rain-softened earth, they circled her cabin completely. Each print was nearly twice the length of her own foot, the stride so long she had to take 3 steps to match one of his. But it was the pattern that stole her breath. He hadn't just circled randomly. The tracks showed where he'd stopped to brace her loose shutters, where he'd shifted a water barrel to block the wind from her chicken coop door. He had spent the storm not sheltering, but protecting her cabin, her meager animals, her. That evening, she cooked some of the venison. It was tender, rich, and flavorful, far better than anything she had managed to hunt herself. As she ate, she found herself glancing at the dark window, wondering if he watched her now, wondering if he knew she was eating his gift. The herbs remained on the table. On impulse, she took a pinch of the dried leaves and added them to her coffee. The taste was earthy, slightly sweet, and a warmth spread through her chest that eased the constant knot of tension she carried. She slept better that night than she had in months. No dreams, no jumping awake at every creak. The storm had changed something, The sense of being watched had shifted from menacing to something else, protective perhaps, or possessive. Ilara tried not to think too hard about which it might be, or about the way her heart now jumped, not entirely from fear, when she sensed him near. The time of simply being observed was ending. Kalen had made his presence known. The morning Ilara found the fresh, deep footprints beside her well. She knew he'd been closer than ever before. She was tracing their impossible size, with her eye when his voice came from directly behind her. "You are too thin." Ilara whirled, the bucket clattering to the frost-hardened ground. He stood at the very edge of her property, where the wild grassland began, and even at 30 feet away, his sheer size stole her breath. 7 feet of muscle and sinew, shoulders wide as a barn door, skin the color of polished copper in the winter sun. He wore buckskin leggings and a plain cloth shirt that strained across his chest. His hair, black as crow feathers, was held back by a leather band, falling past his shoulders. But it was his face that held her, angular, strong, with eyes dark as deep water, watching her with an intensity that made her legs weak. "You've been leaving me food," Ilara managed, surprised her voice worked at all. He inclined his head slightly. "The widow Vance needs meat for winter." The way he said her full name, correctly, carefully, told her he had been listening in Oakhaven, learning about her. "I can hunt for myself." His eyes moved over her thin frame, the slight hollows beneath her cheekbones. "No, you cannot. You eat sparrows and rabbits and grow weak. A hard winter comes. You will not survive it alone." "That is none of your concern," she retorted, lifting her chin. "I have made it my concern." He took a single slow step closer, and Ilara had to fight the urge to stumble back. "Why?" The question was a demand. "Why watch me? Why help me? What do you want?" He was silent for so long, she thought he would simply vanish again. When he finally spoke, his words hit her like a physical shock. "By the spring thaw, you will have my son growing inside you." The bucket rolled away, clanking on the stones. Ilara stared, unable to process the deliberate certainty of the statement. "What did you say?" "You heard." His voice was calm, certain, stating a simple factual truth like the coming of snow. "I have chosen you. You will bear my child." "You are insane!" Ilara backed away, her hand instinctively reaching toward the rifle inside. "You cannot just—" "I can." He moved then, faster than something his size should move, closing half the distance in 2 fluid strides. "But I will not take by force. You will choose me. You already search for me in the shadows. Your body knows what your mind denies." Heat flooded Ilara's cheeks. "Get off my land!" "This was my people's land before your husband put stakes in it," Kalen stated, without anger. "But I do not come to reclaim Earth. I come to claim you. I am not property to be claimed. I am not—" Her voice broke. "My husband hasn't been gone 4 months." "Your husband is dead." The words were blunt, but his tone held a strange, sad gentleness. "You mourn him in an empty bed while your body cries out for life. I can smell your loneliness like smoke." "Stop." Ilara wrapped her arms around herself. "Just stop." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I am Kalen of the Shoshone. My name means he who hunts alone. You should know the name of your child's father. We will not be—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Not today," Kalen agreed, "but soon, Ilara Vance, you will open your door to me, and when you do, I will plant my seed in your belly as surely as your husband planted corn in this earth." The raw, crude certainty of it should have sent her running. Instead, Ilara found herself frozen, caught by something in his eyes, not arrogance, not lust, but a deeper, ancient knowing, as if he could see the aching, hollow emptiness beneath her widow's weeds. Ilara's resolve is crumbling in the face of Kalen's relentless, confident purpose. If you were in her place, what is the most compelling reason to accept this impossible demand? Is it the guarantee of survival, or the desperate human need for touch and connection? "The town will run you off if you keep coming here," she managed, her voice shaking. "They're already talking. They'll send riders." "Let them come." Kalen's smile widened slightly, showing white teeth. "I have walked between their bullets before. Their fear makes them stupid. I will return. I'll shoot you myself if you come near my cabin again." "No," he said simply. You will not. You don't know me. I know you wake crying in the night. I know you hold your husband's pillow to your chest and breathe in his fading scent. Kalen continued, his voice dropping low. I know you stand at your window and search the darkness, hoping for something, anything, to break the silence of your grief. Tears sprang to Alara's eyes. How dare you? I know, Kalen continued, because I too have lost my woman, Ayana, and our child to the white man's sickness. I know the shape of emptiness, the crushing weight of a bed meant for two. The tears spilled over, hot on her cold cheeks. Ilara turned away, unable to bear the terrible understanding in his eyes. Please, just leave me alone. I will give you time, he said, but not much. Winter comes quickly here. She heard him move away, his steps nearly silent despite his massive frame. When she finally turned back, he was at the edge of the tall grass, pausing to look back. The herbs I left, brew them in hot water when your monthly blood comes. They will ease the pain and prepare your womb. Ilara's face burned. I won't. You will, he said with that infuriating certainty. Your body is young and strong. It wants to create life. I will help you remember what it means to be alive. Then he was gone, melting into the landscape like morning mist. That night, Ilara barred the door and checked the rifle twice. But when she finally fell asleep, her dreams were not of Silas. They were of dark eyes and copper skin, of massive hands that could snap her like kindling, yet touched with surprising, inexplicable gentleness. When her monthly time came 3 days later, bringing with it the familiar cramps and misery, she found herself brewing the tea with shaking hands. The warmth that spread through her belly felt like more than a physical relief. It carried the essence of the giver, wild and strong, and absolutely certain of what was to come. Ilara Vance, widow, respectable woman of Oak Haven, sat in her lonely cabin and drank tea brewed from Shoshone herbs. In the darkness beyond her window, she knew Kalen waited with the patience of the earth itself. The very idea should have repulsed her, yet her treacherous body warmed at the thought. Winter was coming, and with it, a reckoning she was nowhere near ready to face. The deer carcass appeared at dawn, hung properly from the oak post near her cabin, already dressed and ready for butchering. Ilara stood in her doorway, shawl pulled tight against the biting cold, staring at the gift. 3 weeks had passed since Kalen's declaration. 3 weeks of finding gifts, of sensing his presence, of listening for footsteps that rarely came. She should have ridden to Oak Haven and demanded the sheriff form a posse. Instead, she found herself looking for him in the purple shadows of dusk. She approached the deer, running her hand over the clean, precise cuts. This was artistry, not a scrap of meat wasted. Despite herself, a flicker of appreciation, almost intimacy, warmed her. I know you're watching, she called out to the empty morning. This has to stop. No answer. Kalen revealed himself on his own terms, appearing and vanishing like a change in the weather. She busied herself cutting the meat, her movements sharp with frustration. Each gift felt like a new thread, binding her to his impossible promise. That afternoon, she rode into Oak Haven for supplies, needing the normalcy of human voices. But even Oak Haven felt small now, its routines pale against the vivid, overwhelming presence that haunted her homestead. Ilara, dear, you're looking well, Mrs. Patterson observed at the general store, her eyes sharp with curiosity. Better than you have in months. It was true. The herbs, which she'd sworn not to use but kept brewing, had eased more than her pains. Her sleep was deeper, her appetite stronger. The hollow look was leaving her cheeks, replaced by a vitality that felt dangerously close to life. The air agrees with me, Ilara said carefully. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You haven't seen that Indian about, have you? The giant? Bill Morrison swears he spotted him near Widow Hemlock's place. No, Ilara lied smoothly, though her hands trembled as she paid. I've seen nothing unusual. The whole ride home, her mind churned. How long until her improving health was connected to Kalen's constant presence? How long until suspicion curdled into something far worse? She was unsaddling her mare when she sensed him. The mare nickered softly, ears pricked but unafraid. Ilara turned to find Kalen standing at the edge of her property in plain daylight. You went to town? He stated, not a question. I needed supplies. Alara focused on the saddle, trying to ignore the frantic quickening of her pulse. Supplies I paid for with money, like civilized people do. Civilized? He tasted the word. Is that what you call it when they whisper about you? When they pity the barren widow who waits for death? The word barren stung like a slap. How dare you? They smell death on you, Kaelin continued, moving closer with unnerving grace. I bring you life, and you cling to their approval. Their approval keeps me safe. They will do nothing. He was close enough now that she had to tilt her head back sharply to meet his dark, steady eyes. They fear me, as they should. I do not fear you. I don't fear you, Alara said, surprising herself with the truth of it. His hand rose, hovering near her cheek without touching. No, you do not. That is why I chose you. The air between them crackled with tension. Alara swayed toward him, drawn by a force deeper than reason. His scent enveloped her, leather and sage and wild places untouched by the white man's world. Tell me about her, she heard herself say, the request raw and unexpected. Your woman. Kaelin's hand dropped. For a fleeting moment, his controlled expression fractured, revealing the profound depth of his old pain. Her name was Ayanna, like the dawn. She died bringing our son into the world, and he followed her before the next sunset. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate. The white doctor came too late, said our medicine was savage, but his civilized medicine could not save them either. Kaelin's jaw tightened. I burned their bodies, as is proper, and walked away from my people, could not bear their pity, their whispers. That's why you're here alone, Alara realized. Not alone, his dark eyes held hers. Not anymore. I offer you strong sons, protection, a purpose beyond waiting for death. And what do you get? A woman who understands loss but hasn't let it break her, he said with stark honesty. A womb to carry my bloodline, a chance to build what was stolen from me. The honesty was breathtaking. No pretty words, just raw, absolute need. Alara found herself considering the offer with terrifying clarity. The town will never accept it. A white woman with an Apache. We will go west, Kaelin interrupted, looking past her toward the horizon. To the territories, to San Lucia, where such things matter less. I know places where we could live freely. Leave? Alara looked at the cabin, the land Silas claimed. I can't just leave. You cannot stay. Kaelin gestured at the homestead. Another winter alone will break you. If not your body, then your spirit. I have watched you. You are strong, but strength has limits. He was right. The pity from Oakhaven, the crushing silence of the nights. It was a death by slow freezing. I don't love you, she said quietly. Love comes after, Kaelin replied. First comes choice, then trust, then bodies learning each other. Love grows from such soil. And if I can't give you sons, if I'm barren, like they whisper? His hand rose again, this time settling warm and heavy on her flat stomach, the heat burning through the layers of cloth. You are not barren. I would smell it if you were. Your womb is empty and eager. It will quicken at my seed. The certainty of the claim should have offended her deeply. Instead, a terrifying heat pooled low in her belly. Alara stepped back, breaking the contact. I need time to think. Think quickly. Kaelin glanced at the sky. Snow comes soon, and with it, decision time. He left her standing there, one hand pressed to her stomach, where his touch lingered. That night, she lay wakeful, arguing until dawn. When she finally slept, she dreamed of copper-skinned children with her bright eyes, playing in territories she'd never seen, while their immense father taught them to walk between two worlds. She woke with an ache in her chest that had everything to do with want. The dance had begun in earnest, resistance and temptation, spinning her toward an impossible future. Das Stars. The wolves came on the first night of December, when the full moon hung like a silver coin. Alara woke to their hungry howling, close and circling the property. She snatched the rifle, counting 6 shadows slinking around the chicken coop. They were desperate, thin, and deadly. A sudden heavy thud on the roof, then another. The wolves heard it too, their heads snapping upward. A shadow dropped from the roof, massive and fluid, landing in a low crouch that made no sound despite its weight. Kalen. He rose slowly, moonlight painting his bare chest silver, a war club in one hand, a knife in the other. The wolves backed away, confused. Kalen let out a sound that raised every hair on Alara's body, a low, terrifying growl that spoke of ancient nights when men were not prey but predators. He spread his arms wide, making himself larger, and charged. What followed was a brutal ballet of efficiency. The alpha lunged, Kalen sidestepped, bringing the club down with a cracking sound on the wolf's skull. He spun, the knife flashing, opening the throat of another that tried to flank him. The remaining pack fled, melting back into the darkness. Alara rushed to the door, hands fumbling with the bar. "Kalen!" He turned. She saw the deep knife slash across his ribs, blood running dark down his side. Without thinking, she threw open the door, exposing herself entirely. "You're hurt. Get inside." He swayed slightly, the battle adrenaline fading, but allowed her to guide him in, ducking through her doorway, his presence immediately filling the small cabin. Ilara's hands trembled as she lit more lamps, finally seeing the wound clearly. It ran from his lower ribs to his hip. She gathered clean cloth and water, trying to keep her touch purely clinical as she knelt beside the chair and began cleaning the cut. His skin was furnace hot under her fingers, marked with older scars that spoke of a lifetime of battles. "Why?" she whispered, dabbing away the blood. "Why risk yourself for my chickens?" "Not for chickens," his voice rumbled. "For you. You would have died protecting birds." "They're all I have left," she said, then realized the terrible admission in her own voice. "You have more than chickens now." His hand covered hers, stilling her ministrations. The moment stretched tight between them. She finished bandaging his middle, trying to ignore the overwhelming intimacy of the act. "There," she said, sitting back on her heels. "You'll live." "Yes." He caught her wrist as she started to rise. "Ilara." The way he said her name, soft and careful, like tasting something precious, made her throat tight. She looked up at this giant, bleeding in Silas's old chair, a presence who suddenly, terrifyingly, felt like he belonged. "Thank you," she whispered. His thumb stroked the inside of her wrist, finding her pulse. "You opened your door to me. You were hurt. You opened your door." His dark eyes held hers. "As I said you would." The truth of it hit her like cold water. She had. Without a thought, she had invited him in, tended his wounds, and let his immense presence fill her sanctuary. "This doesn't mean," she began. "It means what it means." He released her wrist and stood. "The wolves will not return, but other dangers will come. I cannot always be your shadow." He moved to the door, his hand on the latch. "Think on this, Alara Vance. Think what might have happened tonight if I had not come." Then he was gone, leaving only blood-stained cloths and the lingering warmth of his presence. Ilara sank into the chair he'd vacated, her wrist tingling where he'd touched her. She inhaled the scent of him clinging to her skin, wild, male, and undeniably alive. She had killed for her, bled for her, and she had opened her door. The resistance was failing. The choice was being made not by her mind, but by her deeper self. Oh. The blizzard struck 3 days later, a blinding, crippling white rage that trapped Alara inside. By the second night, her indoor woodpile was nearly gone. The rest was outside, unreachable. She was shivering violently, contemplating burning furniture. When the knock came, 3 measured raps that cut through the wind's scream. Her heart leaped. She struggled to lift the bar with numb fingers, fighting against the snow piled against the door. Kalen pushed inside, bringing a blast of ice and cold. Ice crusted his hair, but he moved as if the killing storm were merely a mild inconvenience. In his arms, he carried an enormous load of firewood. "How did you—" Alara's teeth chattered too hard to finish. He ignored the question, moving straight to the hearth and building up the dying flames. Blessed roaring heat filled the cabin. Only then did he turn to look at her, taking in her blue lips and violent shivering. "You are nearly frozen." "I'm fine," she insisted, but he was already pulling her toward the fire. His hands, impossibly warm despite the storm, rubbed her arms, her back, forcing circulation into her numb limbs. Alara wanted to protest, but her body betrayed her, leaning into his heat like a flower toward the sun. Foolish woman, he muttered, using his own tongue for words that sounded like curses. Too proud to call for help. Call how? She managed. Smoke signals? His hands stilled on her shoulders. You make jokes while nearly dead from cold. Another hour. He cut himself off, his jaw clenching. The barely controlled fear in his voice broke Alara's own composure. You came, she whispered, through the storm. I will always come. The simple certainty of it made her eyes burn. He brewed her a dark, fragrant tea from the pouch at his belt. Drink. All of it. The liquid burned going down, spreading a powerful heat. Within minutes, the shivering eased. She clutched the cup, watching him settle on the floor near her chair, his back against the hearthstones. You were watching through the storm, she said. Why didn't you come sooner? You had not asked. His dark eyes found hers. You have to choose it. I will not force my presence, but I will not let you die from pride either. Alara set down her cup, studying him. He had risked himself, fighting through a killing storm because he knew she needed him. Stay, she heard herself say. His entire body went still. Alara, if I stay, I may not leave. The weight of his words was absolute. This was the moment of choosing. The door, once opened fully, might never close. I know, she whispered. He rose in one fluid motion, towering over her chair. Be certain, once we begin this path... I'm tired of being cold, Alara interrupted, standing to face him. Tired of being alone. Tired of pretending I don't look for you in the shadows. His hand rose to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a single tear. You shake still. From cold or fear. Neither. It was true. The trembling came from anticipation, from relief, from the terrifying surrender to what her body had known for weeks. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. Alara rose on her toes instead, meeting him halfway. The first touch of his lips was gentle, a question asked and answered. Then her hands fisted in his thick dark hair, and gentleness burned away like morning mist. He kissed like he fought, with total focus, overwhelming strength held in careful check. Kalen's mouth claimed hers with a hunger that matched her own, his hands spanning her waist, lifting her effortlessly against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alara felt utterly transformed. The widow's weeds might still clothe her, but the woman beneath had awakened with a terrifying, primal vengeance. Your bed, Kalen said roughly, or I take you here by the fire, like an animal. The crude honesty of it sent heat pooling low in her belly. Alara took his hand, leading him, to the bed she had shared with Silas. Tonight, those memories felt distant, faded, meaningless against the vivid reality of the man beside her. What followed was nothing like her timid marriage bed. Kalen was unashamed in his desire, undressing her slowly, his hands and mouth worshipping each revealed inch of her skin, until Alara writhed beneath him, her dignity forgotten. When he finally joined with her, Alara cried out, not in pain, but in recognition. This was what the empty nights had been building toward. Kalen moved over her, within her, with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else, and Alara found herself meeting him, thrust for thrust, her voice calling his name into the storm-wild night. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, Ilara's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. The storm still raged outside, but inside, she felt a quiet completion, a connection that rooted her to the earth. Your promise, she said quietly, about a child. His hands played possessively over her flat stomach. It begins now, tonight. I feel it. You can't know that. I know. He tilted her chin up to look at him. As I knew you would open your door, as I knew you were mine from the first night I saw you. And if you're right, if there's a child, then we go west before I show, she said, her voice firm. Yes. Find a place where no one asks questions about a tall woman with green eyes and her Apache husband. Husband? Alara tasted the word. You are my woman now. His arms tightened. I am your man. The white man's papers mean nothing, but if you need them, we will find a priest who asks no questions. Alara leaned into his strength. The life of the widow Mackenzie was over. This wild, impossible thing was life flooding back. Yes, she said simply. He kissed her again, and the storm outside seemed to quiet as if nature itself recognized the pact made in this small cabin. She watched him move to tend the fire, the play of light on his powerful, graceful body, and felt not the slightest urge to look away. She was no longer the proper grieving ghost. She was Alara, woman of Calin, carrying his promise beneath her heart. By February, Ilara's body had begun its profound transformation. The morning sickness came first, sending her stumbling from bed, while Calin held her hair back, his massive hands gentle against her neck. "The child makes itself known," he had said, satisfaction rich in his voice. Now she stood before the mirror, tracing the subtle changes, her breasts tender, her waist losing its sharp definition, and just below her navel, the undeniable, burgeoning roundness. "You study yourself like a map," Calin observed from the doorway, moving behind her, his hands coming to rest on her belly. "What do you search for?" "Proof," Alara admitted, "that this is real, that I'm not dreaming." "The child is real. Your fear is real too." He kissed her neck. "You think of Oakhaven, of their judgment when they see you carry a Shoshone child." "We need to leave soon," she said quietly. "Yes, but first, you must learn." Calin stepped back. "Where we go, there will be no towns, no stores. You must learn to be a woman of the earth. I will teach you." So began Alara's education. Each day, Calin taught her how to read the landscape like a book, how to tan hide until it was soft and supple, and how to move quietly through the snow. "Your people make too much noise," he explained, demonstrating a silent stride. "Always announcing themselves. My people learn to be part of the land." Alara struggled, feeling clumsy in her sturdy boots. "I'll never be able to do that." "Not with those boots." He knelt, unlacing them. "Feel the earth. Know where you step." She removed her boots. The ground was cold through her stockings, but she found he was right. Without the heavy leather, she could feel roots, rocks, the texture of the soil. Her steps grew careful, deliberate. "Better," Calin approved. "The child you carry will walk both paths. You must know enough to teach them." Calin is preparing Alara for a new, harsher reality. What one item from Alara's current life, a book, a specific tool, a piece of clothing, would Calin insist she take, and why? Consider which object bridges their two worlds. The changes went beyond the practical. Alara's entire way of thinking was shifting. The rigid schedules of her old life gave way to a more natural rhythm. She learned to read weather in the flight of birds, the way Calin's old wound ached before storms. She struggled with words in his language, simple things at first. Water, fire, child, love. "Your tongue fights the sounds," he said, amused. "Everything about me fights," Alara admitted. "I was raised to be one thing, and now you become something new." He pulled her close, his hands resting on her growing belly. "As I became new when I chose to walk alone. As we become new together." But the outside world would not stay away forever. One morning, Alara woke to find Calin loading his rifle, his face grim. "Riders coming, from town." Ilara's stomach clenched. She dressed quickly, trying to hide her new fullness under her loosest dress. Through the window, she recognized Sheriff Watson and two deputies. "I recognize them," she whispered. "They come about me." "Someone has seen too much, talked too much. You will say nothing of us." Calin gripped her shoulders. "Whatever they ask, I am a ghost, a rumor. But promise me, Alara, the child." "I promise." The words tasted like ash. Calin kissed her hard, then slipped out the back door, melting into the cottonwoods with unnatural speed. Alara smoothed her hair, pinched her cheeks for color, and went to meet the law. Sheriff Watson touched his hat. "Mrs. Vance, sorry to trouble you." "Sheriff, what brings you out in this weather?" "Reports of an Indian in these parts, a big one. Several folks claim to have seen him near the homesteads. You haven't had any trouble?" Watson's eyes were sharp. "No trouble," Alara lied smoothly. True enough, Calin had never been trouble. "You're looking well," Watson said finally, his gaze lingering on her face. "Better than last time. You been well provided for?" "I've had good hunting this winter. Plenty of meat," she said, her voice calm. Watson glanced around the cabin, his lawman's eyes cataloging details. "Well, you be careful. If this Indian is real, he could be dangerous. Might be safer in town until spring." "This is my home, Sheriff," Alara said firmly. "I won't be driven from it by rumors." The sheriff touched his hat again, a long, searching look lingering in his eyes before he mounted his horse. Ilara watched them ride away until they were small dots on the horizon. Only then did Kalen return, emerging from the landscape as if he'd never left. "They suspect," he said. "Maybe, but they can't prove anything." Ilara turned into his arms. "We need to leave soon." "Yes." His hand found her belly. "When the snow melts enough for travel. 3 weeks, perhaps 4. 3 weeks. Ilara looked around the cabin that had been both her prison and her sanctuary. 3 weeks before her growing child made the truth impossible to hide. That night, as she lay wakeful beside him, the child moved for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings. Ilara gasped, and Kalen's hand immediately covered hers. "You feel it?" "Yes," wonder filled her voice. "Oh, yes, our son." "Son," Kalen insisted. "I have seen it." The undeniable movement settled the final question. She was no longer the widow Mackenzie. She was someone altogether new, carrying the future beneath her heart. The winter was ending, and with it, one life would close as another began. The pains began at sunset on the shortest day of winter, when snow lay thick on the ground and ice crystals hung in the air like frozen stars. Ilara gripped the table as a contraction seized her. "It's time!" she gasped. Kalen was beside her instantly, his face calm, his dark eyes bright with a fierce joy. "The child chooses a powerful day," he said, "when darkness turns toward light." He had prepared meticulously. Clean cloths waited by the fire, water heated in the largest pot. The herbs were laid out precisely. "I should have gone to town, found a midwife," Ilara panted. "No," Kalen's voice was firm. "I have delivered babies before. Trust me." She did trust him, had no choice but to trust him as her body began its ancient wild work. He never left her side, his hands steady, his deep voice a constant anchor, commanding her to walk, to breathe, to push. Time lost meaning. The world narrowed to pain, pressure, Kalen's voice, and the heat of the fire. "I see the head," Kalen announced, his voice thick with emotion. "Dark hair like mine. Push now, Ilara. Bring our child into the world." Ilara bore down with everything she had, a scream tearing from her, throat that was pain, triumph, and recognition all at once. The pressure peaked, then suddenly released as the baby slid free into Kalen's waiting hands. "A son," he said, the wonder in his voice almost audible. "You have given me a son." The baby's cry was strong and angry. Kalen cleaned him with practiced movements, tied off the cord, and placed the small, solid, real body onto Ilara's chest. "He's perfect," she whispered, touching the tiny fingers, the shock of black hair, the small face that was both Kalen's and hers. "He will be called Samuel," Kalen said, his hand covering both of theirs. "Samuel Kalen Vance, a name from your world and mine. Samuel means God has heard. Heard my prayer for another chance. Heard your call in the darkness." The afterbirth came, and Kalen tended her with the same gentle efficiency. Soon, Ilara was clean and comfortable in bed, Samuel nursing at her breast with instinctive hunger. The cabin was warm, peaceful, filled with the profound miracle of new life. "Your promise," Ilara said softly, recalling that first shocking declaration. "You said by winter I'd have your son growing inside me." "And so you did." Kalen sat beside them, large enough to make the bed creak. "I saw it that first night watching you, saw you heavy with my child, saw him at your breast. The Spirit showed me what could be." "And if I was brave enough to accept it," Ilara added, touching their son's cheek. "I was so lost, Kalen, so ready to disappear into nothing. You brought me back to life." "We brought each other back," he gathered them both in his arms. "From the ashes of our losses, we built this." Outside, the snow had stopped. Stars emerged sharp and brilliant. It was, Ilara realized, Christmas Eve. She'd lost track of the days, but somehow it seemed right that their son should arrive now, a gift beyond any she could have imagined. "When do we leave?" she asked. "When you are strong enough, 6 weeks, perhaps 8. The journey will be hard, but I have horses ready, supplies cached along the way. My people, what remains of them, know we come. They will welcome you as my woman," him as my son. We will ride to San Lucia, and we will build a life." His arms tightened around them. "It will not be easy. There will be those who hate what we are, what he is. But the future is not pure white or pure Shoshone. It is mixed, like our son." Alara leaned into his strength, exhausted but exhilarated. The widow Vance was truly gone. In her place sat Alara, mother of Samuel, woman of Calin, ready to ride into an uncertain but vivid future. The journey west is fraught with peril and prejudice. As Alara prepares to leave her old life, what is the single, most compelling reason for her to look forward to the future with Calin, despite the danger? "No regrets," Alara said firmly. "Only gratitude," Calin answered. They stayed awake through the night, whispering plans and promises. When dawn broke clear and cold on Christmas morning, it found them still entwined, a family forged from loss and loneliness, from wild promises and wilder faith. Alara kissed her son's head, then reached up to bring Calin's lips to hers. Outside, the sun rose over a world made new by snow and by the miracle of one small life begun. Inside, a family that shouldn't exist by any reasonable measure drew their first breaths together, proof that sometimes the most impossible promises are the ones most meant to be kept.